Hello again. Who were you expecting? Anyhow, it's me. I'm back. You can't get away from me that easy. All right. Now we talked about OSHA recordables, what makes an injury recordable. And now we're going to kind of look at the flow of these forms, OSHA forms here. And we'll get started on this one here. When I get my act together here, there we go. All right, OSHA forms and accidents. And these are covered in 29 CFR 1904.8 to 1904.38. Looks like a lot, but there's a lot of these are, reserved. So you ought to look at it. It's good information. We're not going to cover all the detail on this thing. We can't too much. So there's a lot of detail in there, which you ought to know. So when and how are the three OSHA forms used? So let's just kind of follow them through. So we're going to start at the beginning. We have an accident. All right. It's good to have an injury. You're going to have an injury, obviously. It could be an illness too, but those aren't as common and they'll be handled a little bit, not as urgent usually. So we're talking about accidents most of the time. So the accident, we have an accident happen. Now, depending on the size of your company, at OK Foods, I was a safety director. I was on call 24/7 and I got called 24/7. And so if somebody had an accident that was serious enough to have them treated off site. Now we had nurses. If they had a little bit of deal with the nurse, not a big deal. But they had to get stitches, go off site. I needed to know. I wanted to be called, and I would go in and look into it. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is if the person's hurt, you want to get a medical attention. Again, that depends on how bad it is, et cetera. A lot of things going on there. So, but you want to make sure that the person who's hurt's getting taken care of. I mean, you got to do that. Ambulance, if you need to, call an ambulance. I mean, if you have to. And you also need to let workers' compensation know, because when a person goes to the hospital or emergency room, there's going to be bills to pay, and they need to know about it so they can pay the bills. And you don't want any more stress on the person that's already been injured either. So, and they probably have some forms to sign, but they need to get involved in it too. And you're probably working a little bit closely with whoever's doing your workers' compensation, either the carrier or your liaison. You may even be the liaison with the workers' compensation carrier, depending how big your company is. And then, of course, you want to investigate the accident and secure the scene if need be. Are there still hazards around? Was a hazard happen? So there may be unsafe conditions. How did this person get hurt? If they slipped and fell on some oil on the floor, well, you want to make sure that oil on the floor is cleaned up, and you want to look around and see if there's any more too. So you want to make sure nobody else gets injured in the same scene that you just had. So you want to make sure that the person gets medical attention, and then you secure the scene to make sure nobody else gets hurt the same way. And then, if possible, get statements from the injured and any witnesses. Now, like I said, at OK Foods, we had nurses, and they initiated this, not the investigation, but the gathering of information. They started the first page of the accident report, and they got the people, and they had access to the computer. They could get the person's address and all this stuff too. And but they also tried to get the statement from the injured in their own words as soon as possible, because what happens is people get to them after the injury and they think about it and they want to change their story. And it's not that you're trying to hide what they want to say. They can say whatever they want to say, but you want to get the facts. So is additional training needed to prevent a recurrence? You had something happen, now you think, well, maybe they did this because there was some glaring issue here that we missed in training, or they didn't get training, or maybe this person even didn't get training. So you want to make sure that that's not an issue. Were any company policies violated, or were company policies not good enough, or were they violated? Now, never discipline a person just because of an accident. You can't do that. Don't ever write somebody up or discipline because they had an accident without investigating it. Now, if they didn't follow company policy, that's different. You may want to get HR involved in that. So they're not getting make absolutely positive, 100% sure that you're not disciplining this person because they had an accident. You're disciplining this person because they didn't follow company policies. So now you're going to start with the OSHA's Form 301 Injury and Illness Incident Report. I hope you've downloaded these and having fun while we're doing this. It might help. Now you can use a different form, but it must contain the same questions that are on the OSHA 301. Now, what I did was I had an accident report at OK Foods. It was 2 pages. The first page was basically done by usually the nurse did this, but almost always. And that was the person's information at the top, what happened, what was the injury, where did they go for medical attention, what kind of medical attention were they given, as much as we could at the time. And I had the exact same questions that are on the OSHA 301 in my accident report, but not necessarily in the same order or in the same place. But what I did was I numbered them to coordinate, to correspond to the numbers on the OSHA 301. So all the years I used that report, some of the questions weren't numbered and some of the questions were numbered and they weren't in sequence, but nobody ever asked me, how come is that like that? Well, the reason was because the numbered questions were the exact same questions that were on the OSHA 301, because you have to have those same questions on your accident report if you do a different one. And that incident report is okay, but it's to me, it's just not enough. My form, that the front of it was the kind of 301, had still more information on it than 301 has. And then the second page was the accident investigation and follow up on it. And I didn't do all of those, and I'd helped in them, or maybe, but that's because since OK Foods was all over the place and all 24/7 in a lot of locations. I had the supervisor had to do that, or the superintendent. Somebody on the chain of command there had to fill out the second page of the report. They had to look into it, find out what happened, and follow up on it and get that back to me. And then sometimes that was an issue, but that's the way it was done. It was a pretty good way of doing it. Also, this form must be completed within 7 calendar days of the incident. Now, again, why wait? Get it done. It's just stupid that it looks like you're dodging it to an inspector when you wait like that. Just get it done. And these have to be kept on file 5 years following the year which it pertains. So that's all 5 whole years after that. So it's not a big deal, but you got to do it. It's the law. So the 301, again, probably want to keep the original in the file pertaining to the incident. You're probably going to have a file on that, or maybe workers' comp keeps that. That could be too. But you want to have a file, and they probably want to copy that report too. But they probably want to keep the file in the original in the file pertaining to the incident. I don't know if you're keeping a file on the incident. You certainly should keep the report. Suggest a copy in the chronological file too, and the OSHA inspector may want to see it. So then after you've got the 301 completed, you're going to get to the OSHA Form 300, the log of work-related injuries and illnesses. It's also called the OSHA log or the 300. There's a lot of short names for it. So again, same thing. Must be within 7 calendar days of the accident. Now, then on OSHA log is pretty simple to do, especially if you've got an accident report in front of you. It's the give it a number. I just can give it a number on that report, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You might want to put the year like 22 on, but the year goes on the report anyhow, so you don't worry about that too much. So, and just follow what it says on the piece of paper. It's pretty simple. Just the facts, man. And again, keep on file 5 years following the year which it pertains. It's okay to make changes or to correct incorrect data. You can, if it gets to be sloppy, you can just cross that whole out and just enter it again. That's okay. OSHA inspectors, that's okay. They're not going to worry about how pretty the report is. What they're concerned about is the accuracy of it. I've never had a problem with them being nitpicky on the report as long as it was accurate. And again, you never, ever, ever want to lie to an OSHA inspector or a government agency. We don't want to lie to anybody, really, but don't ever lie to them. You don't have to volunteer information, mind you, but don't tell them a lie. And on these forms, don't fudge information. Don't lie. Just tell it like it is. And that's best for everybody. And don't let anybody in the company try to convince you to do otherwise. Whatever it is, it is. And if you don't do that, then and how do you deal with the situation too? If you don't have the situation to find out what happened, then how do you deal with it? If it's not a true true situation. If you fudge the information on it, then you can't really deal with it. So again, the ocean inspector almost certainly will want to see at least the last 3 complete calendar years of all 3 forms. So far where you can access it quickly. That's almost always what they do. Now, sometimes, for instance, we had one down at the Heavener Female, I think it was, and the OSHA forms were in my office in Fort Smith. So it took me a while to get them down to them, and they didn't have a problem with that. They understood it. They're usually, I think they can tell when you're trying to hide something or not. They have a pretty good idea. And if it takes you time to get the information, that's not hiding it. That's just the way it is. So explain it to them. Just talk to them. You never know what you're going to get with an ocean inspector, but most of them are pretty understanding. And again, now at the end of the calendar year, you're going to get that 300A out. That's a summary of work-related injuries and illnesses. And you want to transfer the information from the 300 log. Enter the establishment information where required. Enter the SIC or the NAICS. So the SIC, Standard Industrial Classification, is kind of the old system. It's not in use anymore, but you can cross-reference that to the new, if you have it on maybe an old report you might find, or you can cross-reference that online to the NAICS, North American Industry Classification System number. So those are numbers that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses to collect the data. That's why they want that on the report. And they want your hours worked. And you'll find out in a second here. Got to enter the average number of employees. And if you read all this stuff, enter on the first slide here, it'll tell you about that. And it's generally the number of employees just has to be consistent with the number of hours. That's all. And the total hours worked by all employees last year. I think I had a question one time on average number of employees, and it was because if you have a lot of turnover, then you're going to have a lot of employees, and so you're not going to have 2,000 hours per employee. You're going to have way less than that. But they called me and I explained it, and that was it. And the total hours worked by all employees last year. So that's you can probably get that through payroll. You can take your salaried employees and multiply by 2,000 hours. Where does 2,000 hours coming from? Basically, most people work 40 hours a week and 50 weeks a year. That's a rule of thumb. I mean, management employees work more than that, but usually, and 50 weeks, most people take at least 2 weeks off every year. So that's where they get the 2,000 hours as a year's worth of work. It's got to be signed by a company executive. Now, in the OSHA information, they want somebody pretty high up. I always signed them. I never had a problem with those. So they didn't seem to have a problem with them because nobody else knew it. Nobody else, you're testing to the information on this log. And my boss could not do that. They couldn't attest to the information being accurate. I could because I've looked at these logs and I worked with them and I completed them. So I never had a problem with signing them. And then you want to post that puppy by February 1st. And somebody gonna be looking over your shoulder at midnight on January 31st or so? No, I don't think so. But again, it's a government form. You want to get it up there in time. They will. It's just stupid to not do it. If you're not going to do that post by February 1st, then you're in the wrong business. You need to go to find a job. And leave it posted till April 30th. Now, this is right on the form, so you don't have to memorize it. And you leave it posted up there somewhere, everybody can see it, usually on a bulletin board. And don't cover it up with anything else. They make sure that they say that in the regs too. Make sure everybody can see it. Again, it is what it is. So if it's good, that's fine. Pat yourself on the back. If it's bad, that's not fine, but do something about it. And be sure to keep a copy of it because you post it up somewhere, somebody's liable to rip it off, depending on how your bulletin boards are. But that's reality of life. So make sure you have a copy of it so you can get it up again if somebody does. Now, I've seen OSHA inspectors come in California. We had to have these big posters of all this different stuff, and we just bought them every year. It was cheaper to just buy them all every year for everybody and post them. Try to keep them. They had patchworks to keep them up to date, but just buy new ones every year was a lot easier. And I noticed that one time the OSHA inspector came in, went right to that report. And you know what he looked at on it? He looked at the office he was in had moved. So that was relatively new information. So the only thing he looked at on that whole entire report, this laminated big report, was like 3 by 3 or something, like 3 feet by 3 feet with all this stuff, information on it. He went right to that what the local addresses were, to see if the address on there was the current address, that he knew the report was current. That's how he knew that this report was current. And it was. And so that's all he did, looked at, and it's all. I mean, he did things, but as far as our postings go, that's all he looked at. But again, this is government stuff, and you don't want to mess with it. And besides, this is good stuff because this is information for you too. So now complete your company's OSHA rate. Now people have finagled this all over the place, but what you do with this, but it's pretty simple. You take the total number of injuries and illnesses times 200,000, then divide this number by the total hours worked. So where does 200,000 come from? Remember the 2,000 hours per person times 100 people. So this is basically approximately the incident rate per 100 employees. So that's where you get that number at. Now you can go online and look for BLS Table 1, Google that, and you'll get it for the appropriate year. It won't come out until late in the following year, September or October. And find your NAICS code on it compared to the OSHA rate you just computed. This is how you're going to use this information that you've gleaned over the years, you've obtained. Now, you'll look at that OSHA table, BLS Table 1, and it says non-fatal injuries. But to me, that's wrong. It should be total injuries, because let's just say you had a relatively decent sized company and you had 10 accidents in a year, and 5 of them were fatalities. So now on your NAICS code, on your OSHA rate, if you just do non-fatal, you're going to have 5. You're going to look pretty good rather than 10, but you left off the most important ones. So, I mean, how does that even make any sense? And again, because you're using the number times 200,000, on backspace a little bit, 200,000. So you can see it's a macro number, this OSHA rate. When you have a small organization, if you have one injury and you don't have 100 employees, you only get 20 employees, well, that number is going to be pretty high. So you have to take that into consideration too. That's a number that's, like I said, it's a big, that has to do with macro data. So a lot of data. So now you can take this table 1, you can look at it, find you've got your NAICS code, and now you can look at the headings that are at the top. Now they don't, the fallacy, one of the things they do in this report was you scroll down, the headings don't stay. So like you would do in an Excel spreadsheet. So you're going to have to make sure you know which column you're looking at. But after you use it for a while, you get used to it. And you want to compare it to the OSHA rate you just did for your company. So you find your NAICS code and you see what your OSHA rate is, and you want to look at the OSHA rate for your NAICS code. And if your rate's higher than that, you better get off your butt and do some work, because that's not good. If it's lower than that, that's okay, but you might want to try to even get it lower, of course. But that gives you kind of a benchmark. Now, you can also compute the rate for cases with days away from work, that's a column, and cases with days of job transfer or restriction. You notice on that BLS Table 1, then they're kind of like a bracket above the top of those, because you can combine the two to get a DART rate, they call it, days away restriction transfer. I mean, you can go crazy on this information. I never did any of this stuff, because DART rate is just what they're trying to do, days away restriction transfer, as opposed to other. They're trying to pick out the most, the worst injuries. But it really doesn't really make a lot of sense, because days away, somebody could be away 360 days, or let's say 180 days, that's all you can cap it on a report, or 1 day, and it's going to count the same. So does that make any sense? So I just say count everything that's OSHA recordable, because the OSHA recordables could have very well been one of these too. You want to count everything that's OSHA recordable, in my opinion, anyhow. So that's the only one number I would ever use. But sometimes people will use this, and then you could, and that's why I'm saying you could take 10 times, you put out a bunch of numbers, you get people trying to maneuver them and manipulate them so they can look better. So now, if your company uses a lot of outside contractors, they need to be vetted. Now, we use a lot of outside contractors at OK Foods, and we also we're under process safety management, and process safety management requires you to vet your contractors. So how are you going to vet contractors? Well, you're going to use this. You're going to get their OSHA summaries, 300 days for 3 years initially, and then every year after they have to send it to you. Now, sometimes you got to chase these down, but the consequence to them was you would not let them do business with your company. So never had to do that, but I think if I did, that I would get backed up on it. So, and you want to compute their OSHA rate, because if you got the 300-day, you got that data, you got the hours on it, you got the injuries. So, and then you want to compare it to the rest of their industry, not your industry, because that's why they do this by industry. So you want to compare it to their industry. So you want to look at if they're an electrician and their OSHA rate is 3.7 and the OSHA rate for the industry is 4, okay. Now, if the OSHA industry rate for their industry is 4 and they're at 8, you might want to say, whoa, hold on. I'm not saying not use them, but I'm saying you need to get more information. There may be a good answer. They might have had one catastrophic accident, and it was investigated, handled, and all that stuff. They might just be lousy, and you don't want those people working around your highly hazardous chemicals, that's for sure. And you probably don't want them on your site. So that's a good benchmark to use when you're vetting outside contractors. Now, if you just hire an electrician to come in and do one little thing, you can't vet them too much. But if you're under process safety management, you need to vet your contractors very, very well. So what about OSHA recording forms? They're lagging indicators, which means what? They are indicators of something that's already occurred. Now you have leading indicators, which kind of like that are less hard and fast, like how many people attended safety meetings, all stuff, and all that's good stuff. But these are lagging indicators, which means they're very accurate. And also they're accurate because you're looking at data that is well defined by OSHA's, what an OSHA recordable accident is. Everybody's using the same parameters to decide if this was an OSHA recordable accident, or everybody should be. Do people fudge these? They might, don't. I mean, it is what it is. And you can't, like I said, if you're hiding something that's bad, then you're not going to do something about it. So if it's bad, do something about it. And they're required by law. So, I mean, you have to do this. This is not something like, I wish I did this. And don't think you want to get involved in something that's to flaunt the OSHA regulations. That's not a good idea. And it's a great way to benchmark against your peers. You could see, hey, how am I doing against the guy on the other across the country, whatever they're doing with their safety program. You can compare their OSHA rate to theirs and let you know how that goes. And again, it's a great way to vet contractors. You got a contractor with them, and you might not know very much about them, but this is a good way to find out something about them, finding out something about their safety program, how good they are. You can talk to them and go visit them. I've done that. You can get as much information as you can about them. But this is a good way for the safety department to vet contractors. And I did that religiously at OK Foods. So that's it for now. Be sure to read this 1904.8 to 1904.38 for way more details on these forms. And also so you'll know in the future when you've forgotten all this stuff, you'll know where to go to get information on these forms. But these are required forms, required by law. So you want to fill them out. You want to fill them out accurately. You want to fill them out in accordance with the regulations. And you want to use that data as the best way you can. So that's it for now. I hope you're not filling out too many OSHA 301s though. Bye.